All right, so we're gonna be talking about stance and grip. So we'll start with grip. Grip is hugely important because you're controlling an explosion and you're directing the bullet where to go. Now the first thing we want to consider is that the more surface area that we can make contact with the firearm, the more control we're going to have. We also want it to be balanced around the firearm as much as possible. Now the slide, when the firearm goes off, goes back and then it goes back forward. Now ideal control would be if we could line up the slide with our forearm. Now, we can't hold the gun like this because the slide has to move back. So what we want to do is, we want to get our hand, the webbing of our hand as high up into this as we can. Now, obviously you can imagine if you're holding it like this, I'm going to exaggerate, and the firearm goes off, the momentum is going to travel over this line of resistance. Like I said, this is ideal, straight back into my arm. The best we can do is high up here. So the first thing you want to do is shove this up into here and get a firm grip, right? The next thing that we want to do is we want to fill in the space here. Now, you used to be taught to hold it under here. This does nothing. It absolutely does nothing, this teacup grip. I also see some people just grip like this, like they're holding a lightsaber or something. What we want to do is we want to streamline this by putting the palm of our hand right in this empty groove. Now the easiest way to get here naturally is to form a 45-degree angle with the gun here, with our fingers, and that's how we're going to have that angle. Boom, fill in that gap, and then now all you're going to do is you're going to wrap the fingers under and put both thumbs along the slide here. So now from this side, what it looks like is 45 degrees, fill in that gap, wrap the fingers, and now you've got your grip. Here's what it looks like kind of from a top angle. So I'll do it a little bit closer up. Again, high tang grip. We want to fill this gap with our palm, form the 45 degrees, get it nice and snug there, wrap the fingers, thumbs along the slide, and we're ready to rock and roll. Now, one thing that I learned a long time ago, and I have no idea where I learned it, but it's immensely helped me. This is kind of a little expert tip on your grip if you want, is to actually pull both directions. Now I'm going to show you this is clear real quick, even though you're not a real person, but I do want to manage safety here. It is empty. There's no magazine inserted. What you're going to do, if you can look at my fingers here, is when you grip, you want this hand to be pulling this direction and these fingers to be pulling this direction. So essentially you're trying to do this number, all right? So when you grip, you're pulling your fingers in opposite directions. Now, you're not going to squeeze the crap out of your fingers and try and rip your hands apart or rip the gun apart. What this simply does is it applies reverse tension and holds everything tight. This is very similar to when powerlifters lift the barbell, they do an over-under grip. You're essentially doing the same thing where this one's pulling this way and this one's pulling this way, and it cinches down on the grip. Now, this, like I said, this is done to a minor degree, but you can do it just enough to where when you engage, it's nice and firm. Now, as far as grip goes, that's pretty much all there is. You might have to make some modifications. For example, on a 1911, you're not going to be able to get as high of a grip. And for example, you're not going to be able to get your thumb as high up on the slide here because there's not as much room. So your grip is going to be a little bit different depending on the firearm that you're using. This compact version, if you don't have the magazine extension, then you're going to have to figure out your grip without your pinky sitting on anything. All right, so everything's going to be a little bit different depending on the firearm that you own or that you intend to get. Now let's briefly go over stance. Now, stance, there's no perfect formula, but the principle that you want to apply is you want to be able to manage recoil. That's what it all comes down to, is managing the recoil of the gun. The easiest way to do this is to get in a fighting stance. If somebody gets in your face and you're about to fight them, you're not going to stand up like this. You're not going to lean back like this, right? You're not going to fight leaning back. You're going to lean slightly forward. Your feet are going to be staggered. If you can just kind of think of being put in that situation and getting kind of that aggressive fighting stance or football player stance, wrestling stance. You don't want to get low like a wrestler, but you want to be able to be steady, have a little bit lower center of gravity, and be ready to manage that recoil. So looking at it in detail, all we have is simply one foot slightly back, one foot slightly forward. If your natural stance, one foot is turned out slightly, that's okay. Obviously this, you don't have much support front to back, but you do side to side. Typically I'll plant my lead foot pretty straightforward and my back foot is just going to angle out slightly naturally. So when it comes to stance, that's pretty much all there is to it. Once you get out onto the range and once you watch my training course online and start putting a lot of this into practice, you'll get a very comfortable feel of what your stance needs to be and will end up being that fits you and works best for you to manage recoil.